Welcome to Money Market, a Bank of Tampa podcast. We highlight the businesses, expert business advice, local economy, and points of interest in the Tampa Bay market. Follow us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And please share this episode with a friend or colleague if that's something of interest to you. I'm your host, Owen Lefebvre, the Pinellas County Market President for the Bank of Tampa, Tampa Bay's oldest and largest community bank. Our very special guest today is Jensen, the President and CEO of Wannemacher Jensen Architects, with offices in St. Pete, Sarasota, Tarpon Springs, and Miami. But you're more of a design build firm, right? I mean, you're not just an architecture firm.
Well, we're a design firm. We have a sister company, a Create Building company that we like to work with. We like to encourage the full design build experience. And we also do some development, like to get our hands into the actual...
Get your hands dirty.
Yeah, get our hands dirty, but actually in a positive way that if we see a project that we think improves the community, we want to be a part of it.
Well, and you've done a lot of that. I hope to get into a lot of those stories and successes. But so we're talking about architecture, building, urban planning, housing, maybe a little transportation, wherever our conversation leads. This is usually where I read people's bios, but I'm going to mix it up a little bit today. So because I feel I've got a good story and I need to tell it myself. So you and I went on a chamber benchmarking trip to Austin. And for those not familiar with what a benchmarking trip is, chambers will take trips around the country to other cities to see what they've done successfully, what they haven't done successfully, get some good stories and just tips to bring back to their community to implement or maybe do things a little differently. So we go out to which, I mean, I guess like don't Dallas, you're Austin, but it was a very a hipster country bar with an electronic bull.
You got to take in the city. You got to come meet them where they're at.
That's right. And so we did. And so I rode the bull, which is very unimpressive. I get on there and it's very slow and you just tilting it to the side and just stays there. And I very embarrassingly slide off and you come on a handful of people later. So I slip the operator some money and I tell him, make him fall off fast. And he's like, I need to start out slow first so he doesn't get hurt. And I'm like, yeah, we don't want to get hurt. I'm like, just make sure he falls off quick.
You don't want to get hurt too much.
It was the most violent thing that I think I've experienced in a long time. And I give you credit. You didn't last very long, but how violent you were. I mean, you were impressive.
I appreciate that. I mean, it's something about holding on for dear life, and 50 of your most influential colleagues watching you as you do that. Makes you hold on a little bit harder.
Well, I immediately felt embarrassed. I did confess.
So. Yeah, you confess. You did not keep a secret well. So
I felt guilty.
Note to self in future. But I did like.
I even confessed to your wife. I don't know if she had told you that too.
Yes. She told me that, and I did call you out a little bit on the annual board meeting.
You did. Thank you
for that. So I'm glad we're keeping it going. So your time's coming as chamber chair, and I'm sure I'll find another opportunity.
I'm sure I'll get some additional payback. So usually I read people's bios, but people are very proud of their own story. They like to wax poetically, and sometimes it goes on forever. I got your bio, and your bio is 2 pages long. So if anybody can like wax poetically, it's you. But as I was reading through your bio, I didn't really want to cut anything out. It didn't feel appropriate. So I am going to let you wax poetically if you'd like, and just share a little bit. That's the Jensen story.
You don't need to put awards in history, but I've really enjoyed being from this area. Did a short stint in New York City, but then chose to come back. So taking that, becoming principal, buying out an existing firm, then growing that firm from 8 to 80 people over that period of time.
Success story.
Right. I mean, we've been doubling year over year the last 5 years, and really just seeing the team grow. So now you go from designing individual buildings to designing a team, designing strategy. And when you learn how to design, it's not just about what does a building look like or what does this product look like. It's a strategy, a process of thinking, improvising to find a solution for things. So being a part of the chamber was a way of taking that strategy and applying it to new problems, new issues that we're trying to tackle as a community. Really enjoyed that process of learning more about some a kind of atypical architecture, subjects, but taking that process of thinking to apply it to that, and met a lot of leaders like yourself through that process, and developing the next phase. So a lot of buildings we've designed in the midst of that, and a lot of great projects that have built the presence of the firm and the presence of I think our community. And I'd say the one underlying kind of ribbon that ties everything together, what we've done as a company and a group, is focus on community, focus on the actual person, the actual people using these facilities, these spaces, and how can we make that better? So we're not designing just a palace. We're not designing something just for aesthetic grandeur, just to be iconic. I think it's iconic on how the people use it, how the people benefit from it, how does it impact the community. So if we focus on that in everything that we do, I feel like we've been successful.
Well, I think, what I've admired about a lot of your designs is it takes, so many things are either functional or they're aesthetically attractive. And I feel like your projects do a good job of taking both of those together and blending. So, what is your thought process as you're designing something to get to that point where you've got the functionality and aesthetically attractive?
No, it's true. If you're only relying on solving one problem with everything you do, I don't care if it's a building, a methodology in the bank, whatever. If you're only solving one problem,
if you got to hammer everything's a nail,
right? Yeah. It's only going to go so far. So we try to solve at least two problems with everything that we do. And if just for example, a shade structure, if you make the shade structure out of photovoltaic cells, then those are providing shade. It's not just the added cost of putting those on top of another roof. Why not just use those as the roof? Why don't you just use those as the shade? Now I'm killing two birds with one stone. I'm able to afford that extra value. I'm able to afford that sustainability, and I'm able to tell that story to somebody that's walking by it, right? So the Pier Market, for instance, you have every visitor to the city, walks through that area. And originally it was just supposed to be a roof, that had photovoltaics on top of it. Mm-hmm. So we exposed all that. So now it's a story about how green our city is. So when they walk through that, it's very visible that this city is dedicated to sustainability. And we were able to get it to cost much less than anything that we had looked at, doing multiple structures. So two purposes, one activity, and really thinking
problem solving.
Right. And then that one really served a third because it's educational and telling, what are we convicted about as a community to everybody visiting.
So you mentioned the pier. What other projects do you work on?
I've really enjoyed some of the museums and schools that we worked on. The James Museum in Interiors was an amazing project. If you have a chance to go visit that, it's taking you transcending to another world. You don't think Florida.
Amazing. Well, it is. Full disclosure, they're a client, and it's also across the street from my office.
Right.
But yes, it does feel like you have walked into the West and
right.
Arizona or Utah maybe.
Right. It's definitely a different feel. And then the most recent one I'm just proud that our community took on was the YMCA middle school. So placing a YMCA and a middle school on the same site, how do they work together? All these issues of security and, territorialism of these two organizations that, typically give me my space. But we proposed the idea that, hey, you shouldn't only inhabit this space, this site together, but you should come together in one building. So a third of that building, the school uses a third of that building in the morning, and then the YMCA uses that same third after school for all their programming. So imagine if you take that to other organizations and they get so much more out of their investment, and they're able to add on to somebody else's investment as well. We have an amplification effect that I think school boards can start to see other projects and other groups to potentially team with.
Well, I think, we do it in other types of commercial real estate. So when you're looking at, retail use, you don't want to have someone that's, it's a high intensive use. I mean, you want some office, you want some other, low intensity uses to kind of be able to fully utilize the site, not overwhelm. And that's a perfect example of blending, two different organizations. But I also can see there's a lot of resistance, and there was. I mean, people were very vocal.
Took 10 years to just get the idea across the finish line.
So what was, if you could kind of summarize that process and offer advice to, someone else is trying a similar project in our community or maybe outside, what advice would you give to bring those two groups together, people together for a common solution?
Yeah, we talk about all this in chambering, right? Like convening the parties, collaborating, and putting a sense of a true collaboration on the table when you come into that environment. We've done the same thing for so many years, especially in school systems and large institutions like the YMCA, that it's hard to pivot and do something completely new or out of characteristics, and all of these other components are factors of putting pressure. Yeah, it's just tough. It's tough to see, like, where does your line start and stop? And some of the individuals, you have to take it to the highest level of the organizations to think about it, because the day-to-day can get caught up into how do I lock that? How am I going to work the air conditioning? You can't think of that level, right? You have to think of that big picture. And in that case, they had the superintendent of the school system and the CEO of the Y starting that conversation at that level, and blue sky. What could this be? How could we put this together? And what are the advantages to each organization? Keeping that in mind. So, all the logistics. If you get down to the root cause of what what's causing the issues, of each organization, how can you fix that, and do it in a collaborative nature? You can have some success, but you have to put everything on the table first and be willing to do that.
So open communication. At some point in time, as people hear the podcast, they're probably going to get sick, but I'm going to just start pointing it out, because every conversation I've had, and I've started pointing it out, it's about relationship building. And so the mission of the Mega Tampa is to build relationships. And so build the relationship, have trust, have open communication, find out where you can collaborate, where the friction points are, and be honest about it, and then develop a common solution through that relationship building.
Yeah, and how about just a general optimism?
It's a bridge too far to cross, Jason.
Right. I think when you look at successful leaders, there's a few characteristics that people don't talk about so much, and optimism that you can come to a solution, that we can find an answer if we work at this and we have this joint vision. You come into it with that. If factors come in that make it absolutely undoable, okay, well, we'll deal with that when we cross that road. But you have to start from that standpoint.
And I would rephrase that. Optimism makes sense, but just being open-minded,
right?
Versus just closed-minded. And there's the one solution, and this is what I need to be successful.
Right.
Being open-minded that there's another way to do things.
Absolutely.
So, which maybe is a good tie-in. So, being a designer. There's multiple ways we can design our cities and urban planning and economic development. But you having the framework of looking at things, and what I love is, you've got experience not only here within, the Tampa Bay market, but New York, you mentioned Miami. So you've got a good feel of, what makes a good urban center, what's a good plan. What are your thoughts on how we can maximize economic development through urban planning?
This is a subject coming back, both New York and I think both Tampa and St. Petersburg, now Clearwater, investing in Imagine, is all focused on some public investment, and then what is the return on that public investment. So if you weigh that in tax dollars and people not wanting to spend tax dollars on some of these improvements, why am I going to put that money into a park? Why am I in Chicago? Why am I going to put that money into a piece of sculpture in the Bean, right? Why am I going to invest in these projects? When the High Line was suggested in New York, it was on the docket to be torn down.
Okay.
Yeah, so the whole High Line is a mile and a half. That the whole push was, let's tear this down. It's an eyesore, and that will be what redevelops that area of Chelsea. I lived in Chelsea during that era.
Okay.
Right, so I have firsthand. It was
Firsthand
not a good
knowledge.
place
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to be there at night. Those type of things. So it went from tearing down something to creating something. Just a mindset change that, okay, there's another way we can think of this infrastructure and investing in it. So if we make this a community asset, if we put 152 million into the High Line, could that turn this into an amenity? And then we work with the
Spur
zoning.
different development.
Right.
And
Right. So what spurs development more? Like cleaning up, or like just removing something that's an eyesore where it leaves a hole, right? Think of the entire 70s. How many buildings were demolished, leaving holes in our city?
Yep.
That, what does it do? It makes it unwalkable, right? Like now you're not going to walk past that blank block, right? It's going to becomes these kind of void barriers in the
Good
city.
way to put it. Yeah.
Right. So it went from being that to something that was drawing people to it. And I looked at the projections, and the 8 years after the High Line, it increased tax revenue in the surrounding region by 900 million.
That's incredible.
And the economic development was 2.5 billion on $152 million investment. So that's a 6 times factor, and then on economic development, it's about 16 times factor on those dollars. So how can we reproduce this in other cities, right? How can you take that effect and apply it to other areas? At the pier, there was an economic study done when I was working on the pier originally. Obviously, with multiple iterations, going through such a painful
You want to talk about those?
process.
But we got there eventually.
Yeah,
so
we
persistence
got
beats
there
resistance.
eventually. But again, the discussion comes back to people that either wanted to keep status quo, not invest, or tear down completely. We don't need any of this. To okay, no, we're going to double down on this area. We're going to invest in it. We're going to first there was $50 million to just do the pier approach, all of the piece that actually attaches the pier to the city and makes it walkable wasn't in the budget. So we're asking them to double down, right? Double down and invest in that. There was projections that this would have, I think, 1.5 million in patrons over the first year. I don't know the exact numbers, but I believe it was over 3 million. So more than doubled projections. They haven't done a full post economic impact study on that, but
just anecdotally. I mean, the old
anecdotally,
pier was just so sad and
right.
I mean, you're in a beautiful city on the water. I mean, the amenity couldn't be better, and it was just sad. And you look at it today, and
right.
It's vibrant, it's packed.
Right.
There's always an event there.
Yeah, and the economics of any of the towers that overlook that and that are connecting that, and how much is that space advertising to the world. We won international awards for that project. Yeah. That project was in so many publications, so many advertisements that's earned advertising for our area across the world. We're talking hundreds of locations and magazines that have published that. You can't buy that enough advertising as a city.
No, it's
but you can earn it if you do something fantastic like that. So I think for every dollar that you spend in a significant attraction, park, community asset, I think you can pretty much bank between 6 and tenfold return on that investment. So if you look at that aspect, I think you can apply that to a lot of
Now,
locations.
is that an industry number? Or is that a Jason number? Or
originally, for every dollar of a public space, the kind of rule of thumb was around nine times return on that dollar. That's on an economic impact. I would say that's conservative when you look at the High Line, because they were 16 times. So that's where I'm pulling back to kind of industry. Everybody will argue the High Line had the most potential because the real estate and the development potential around it increase.
Sure.
But we have some control over that. Say for other areas of the city, you can increase density and you can increase availability.
Control over zoning and
right.
Well, maybe this is a good tie-in because I would say that we have maybe a greater opportunity in the gas plant district in St. Petersburg that's under consideration right now as we're having this conversation is in March. We hope that City Council will vote in May, but it's uncertain at this point. But that's going to require a public investment. So based on everything that you have shared so far, you believe that it's a worthwhile investment.
I think you apply the same criteria. So you have a whole overall district. The stadium is 10%, a little over 10% of the entire district.
Such a small. Everybody's caught up in the stadium.
Right.
But I mean, we're talking. 10%. It's just a tiny corner.
People also don't understand. 10%. You're able to develop a certain amount on that entire region, right? That entire district. If one building's low, then another building's taller.
Right.
So you're
shifting density.
You're just shifting density around. So if there isn't something on top of the stadium, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen within the site, right? But apply the same factors. You have a really now hip stadium that's right-sized, that is...
Well, and that's your anchor, right?
That's your community
anchor. That's your community amenity.
Right.
And I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No.
You're on a roll.
That's exactly it. That's the anchor. I mean, if you were to apply that to commercial real estate, it's your Publix in the shopping mall, right?
Yep.
They don't. Do they get some subsidies? Yes.
Oh yeah, they have cheap rent.
They get,
but they drive the traffic.
They drive the traffic for the rest of the development, and in every park, that's the cheapest rent. It's actually cost, right? So we paid as a community tax dollars, roughly 70 to 80 million for the pier and the pier approach and that whole redevelopment. So that's the number that we paid out, and then you're looking to recoup from that. Now the stadium is really no different because it's not just a stadium. You have all the public space that's adjacent to the stadium. You have event space that is hosting secondary events directly adjacent to that. So these start to become a symbiotic relationship between all of the walkability around that, all of the public spaces. At the pier and the Vinoy Park, a lot of the events there, the businesses, they flow into downtown from those events. So the more you can program that, the more they're activating a district, right?
Right.
So that's where that symbiotic piece comes. But then you start to also apply that to the entire city. When you're this idea of a major league city, but it's another one of the amenities that when we're selling our city and we're selling our region to players from across the country, they're looking at us as a kind of checklist. What do they have for my employees that they're interested in? Hey, if somebody's moving from Kansas City and they have a bunch of sports fans on there and they want to move to our area and we have no sports team in St. Petersburg, that's a minus. So the economic development of bringing that company there starts to impact from that standpoint. But the economic development in the buildings around the stadium is where we're going to look for that impact. If we increase all of that development, and we're already rezoning, we're already pushing that development into those areas, we're going to measure economic development by the real estate and by the jobs created in the surrounding community of that, which we were doing rough numbers, like 8,000 jobs in potential office space alone. That's on top of the 3,500 plus for the raise, and on top of all the retail spaces, and on top of the economic impact of everybody living in that area are going to be spending the money somewhere else in the city. So all those factors and how much those factors increase because they're adjacent to a quality public space and a quality venue like the stadium and the adjacent event space is all part of that equation.
Well, and you were talking about just being symbiotic. And so the way it's laid out right now, it's multiple different uses. I mean, you're creating a neighborhood. You're creating not only amenity for that specific area, but an amenity for the city that the rest of the city can enjoy. And I think that spillover effect comes. What would you say to, people, maybe some of the biggest objection is you being a developer as well. being a banker, a finance developer. So, I know what they're looking for in terms of a master planned community. But the maybe critique is that we could sell off the individual parcels for a greater gain than just selling to one master developer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you don't want to see it happen for 50 years, absolutely do that. I mean, that's the reality of it, right? Like you can master plan this into a bunch of parcels, and it could be very organic over time, and you will eventually get there. But will that have the same impact as a collective? When you go to New York, like why do all the why is it called the meatpacking district? Like why is it you have all the textiles in one district? You have all the restaurants in a district because you come to that area because you want something, and then you decide where you're going to go and get that, right? You have to have a certain amount of density happen in one place at one time to allow that effect to really create a ripple effect throughout the community. I mean, we're talking not just that little corner of our city, but all of the surrounding areas. If they think that that's not really going to come to full fruition for decades, I'm not really motivated to do this tomorrow, right? Because it's not. I don't see the end in sight. I don't see how far it's going to be.
No one's signing up for a 50-year plan. What's the return on that?
Right,
the discounted cash flow on 50 years.
So they always talk about do you want quality, speed, or cost, right? You have to pick two, right? And so in that way, you have to decide as a community how fast do you want transformation? How fast do you want the housing to come online? How fast do you want to have this public space available and to start affecting the rest of our city? The idea that our city will just continue to endlessly attract forever, and even our region will endlessly attract forever, don't believe it. We had this. We go in cycles, and it's proven, right, over time. This whole region in the 20s, had a huge development, and then it slumped down. So it goes in cycles.
Major cities too. I mean, look at Detroit. I mean, industry changes, things change, so you need to be diversified.
Right.
You need to have other things to attract people to the city, and it's all those different various uses. Because one of the other critiques is, we need affordable housing. We don't have enough affordable housing.
Right.
Just build affordable housing. So why not do that?
So, affordable housing, are you putting one drop in the bucket, or are you creating a hose that can really feed this long term? The need is so great, we can't think small, and thinking that you're going to solve this problem in one district is too small. We have to think community wide, and we may need to invest more in transportation and more in upzoning. Think about the whole central corridor. Think about some of these other commercial corridors that could handle that and could do it more cost effectively and could get people closer to other businesses throughout the city. We're just too focused on downtown alone. It's a whole ecosystem that we need to connect. So if we think about housing in a much larger scale, citywide, and really identify those other areas that we can upzone, you're seeing it in areas like the Skyway District, which I live in, that are one of the hottest, if not the hottest, housing market in the city right now. We have 5,000 units coming online, and we've had 3,000 just finished. So those are more affordable in the market. So think of it holistically. Don't put so much pressure on this one location. If we've seen anything, is that doing one thing in one area doesn't work, right? And when you look at some of these other areas and what did work for them, we have a history of seeing investment in a particular public space, affect this regional effort, but only if we allow it to be a true community, have a place to work, have a place to live. I was thinking that we were talking earlier about the armature works, and the same effect. They built the armature works first, and the stadium and the public space is in the first phase, and then they came and started developing the rest of the community and watched those prices continue to increase and provide more value within that.
Which, and I don't want to steal, or maybe I am stealing your word. So anything I say, I want to credit you for this. But
they're ideas. We don't have to credit.
But no, what was amazing about that is it became a destination. And usually when you lead with retail, I mean, it is a little bit of a lost leader, right? Everything else, the commercial, the office, the industrial, that all comes before. Then the retail comes behind it, and their model was reverse, and it worked, became a destination. And so I see, I mean, obviously different use with the stadium, but it's a little bit of that same, you draw people to the area.
Right.
And then you have all the, other uses that could be added to just that synergy and mix to create that community.
Right. I mean, if I came to you and say, hey, Owen, I want to take a loan out for a indoor retail mall surrounded by nothing in an area that's really it's up and coming at the time, right? You'd say, hey, we don't invest in destination retail.
Cash secured,
right? So it's like, what is your 70% down? So that's the same thing. And people will say, hey, well, the stadium didn't work before this investment. You were supposed to have all this economic investment around it. That's because we built a suburban stadium in an urban core.
Yeah.
Right? So we didn't think of it as an urban plan before with massive parking lots around us.
I mean, let's be honest, there was little thought. They were just trying to build before Tampa got a stadium, and
right.
That's what we got. We got a dinosaur the moment it was completed.
Right. So you can't compare it to the past. We just have to learn from it, learn from our mistakes, and let's fix some of those mistakes with what we're doing right now and move forward. We can't endlessly think about the idea that could happen if we don't do this, because there are too many ideas out there. We have to move forward. I
think that is a good place to leave it, Jason. Anything else you want to add?
For anybody that listens to this podcast or wants to be involved, just do something. Get involved with either your chamber, some type of charitable group working with the community. And you look for meaningful investment back in your community at any level. And I think that working with you in the past and being able to invest in the community at the ground level is where we can really have an impact on our community one step at a time.
Well, and I'll add on to that. Don't just get on social media and complain. So listen to Jason and get active.
Absolutely.
Get it done. Jason, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
You can find us at wjarc.com. Check out our website. We have a lot of fun stuff on there. We have a fun group. I always say if you're fun to work with, you got a good project going on, and we'd like to be that.
Well, and see all of their incredible work that they've done, which is showcased on the website. So cool stuff. Jason, thank you for coming on Money Market. If you have a question or a future show idea or would like to be a sponsor, you can send a message to moneymarket@bankoftampa.com. You can find us on LinkedIn, X, Facebook, and on Instagram at Bank of Tampa and online at bankoftampa.com. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you around in the Money Market.